What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Inspiring Philosophy Academy. I got my boy. I'm gonna call you my boy for this intro. Trent.
Is our Midwest, baby.
There we go.
You
I
got to
got
do
my
my
boy
fingers.
Trent here, and we're gonna be responding to a video that was in response to my Bayesian resurrection case. And I figured, well, why not get one of the world's leading philosophers of probability to come over here and I had to deal with you, okay? But yeah, I figured why not have one of the world's leading experts on this topic come and talk about it with me. This is also very late for me, Trent. I think you know this already about me. It's like I'm usually in bed by now, so I'm very tired.
I just got home. I sent you
Yeah,
a video of me driving into my property.
I know. I'm usually in bed by now. I'm usually up at like 5-ish in the morning, and
Oh,
then
I'll
I'm
be
getting
up at
ready.
4:30 anyway.
Yeah. All right. So, well, let's just kind of get into this. We're responding to a guy that's kind of in the camp of Pelagia and some of these other internet skeptics, Tsai, and he has a lot of the same critiques that I've heard and you've heard many others use. Basically, imagine the critiques that you expect to hear from somebody that has a master's in something and they took a stats class and they went over Bayesian stats and they think that's going to touch the philosophy of probability stuff that we would incorporate into these discussions. So that's the bird's eye view of all this, Trent. I figured he actually pinned a comment that maybe you and I should just kind of go over right away.
Yeah, I
As
think
I
that would
sent it
be.
to you,
Yeah, I think
and
I've got it pulled up next to me, and I think that would be good. It's laudably clear in many respects, unlike the video. So I was a little triggered. Don't worry, don't worry, just a little triggered
just a
by the
little.
by the video. Hey, don't be going pulling stuff up.
Oh no, this is just the
Okay, all right. No, I'm
this is
just
just the
kidding.
comment. This is just the
I'm just
comment.
kidding. I was a little bit triggered by the video because, and the combination of the video and the response, because it's basically a Mote and Bailey fallacy. And for those who don't know what that is, they should really look it up. I think it's MOTE and Bailey
Mhm.
fallacy. And it's not as bad here as it is in like woke political theory, but it's pretty bad Mote and Bailey. He makes this video this like rah, 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 and it's like not clear what he's saying, lots of red herrings, lots of irrelevant stuff, lots of non sequiturs. Then I guess this note a response to you calling him out, because then after that really aggressive, really kind of all over the place video, now it's like, oh no, I didn't, this is all I meant, this is all I ever meant, right? And the claims in this note are like not radical at all. They're misguided in certain respects, but a lot of them are
Yeah.
just exactly true. If it's up to me, I'd go through them basically one by one, like
So
literally line by line.
I didn't do anything. I know for sure there's one person that got into an argument with him in the comments, correcting him on a lot of different things about what he said and about what I'm saying and the assumptions he's made about me and my argument. Um, and I saw some other people do something similar as well. So I think he just got corrected by a lot of other people that know my argument and kind of the not only the metaphysical background, but also the philosophy of probability stuff in the background that's happening.
That's
So
all important because there's nothing worse than some science major or even science grad students, probably really great at what they do, right? That's just had the stats classes for those types of people, because there's almost no philosophical background presented in those classes. And they're taught the most boring, run of the mill, right down the middle, frequency based,
yep,
statistics oriented theories of probability. And so much of the time, since that's all they've really seen, that's all they know, they see anything outside of that paradigm. And it's like, this is blah, blah, blah. And like, I'm in grad school, I do physics. Okay, great, good for you. Now, but you're talking about probability theory. So go get
yeah,
educated about that first before you open your mouth.
yeah. Well, would you also say, because this is something that I picked up on in his video, which is basically a closeted Popperian intuition?
Well, I think in certain respects he's the opposite of Popper because I think, and I think we can get into if we get into the comments, it'll come
He
out.
says some things in the video that sound very Popperian, and it basically just he says he either says wait, and we'll get to the timestamp, but he says either all or the majority of Christian responses to arguments
Unverifiable.
are ad hoc.
Yeah. And that's a bad, Popper is kind of all over the place, actually. Super influential figure and got some cool stuff and got some really bad stuff. There's even, we've studied Popper functions in advanced probability theory. He's a very interesting guy, and his political stuff was kind of out there too. But what I do like about Popper that is a correction to this sort of, just sort of like, I call it low-level grad school frequentism, is that Popper was a propensity theorist about probability for the most part. And that's actually, I think, the main fix to these common errors that you see. Because this video is just one of 1,000 such videos or comments where people just get stuck into this, really rigid definition of probability.
Yeah.
And it wasn't Popper's. Popper was more of a frequentist. More of a propensity theorist about probability, which is definitely the view that I lean towards. And the view that I think most Christian apologists are going to vibe with the best.
Yeah, there's so much happening here. Well, okay, let's just read through this comment because, and for the audience listening, well, actually, this might be helpful for the audience too. Trent, just really quickly, what is a propensity theorist for probability?
So I think it would arise more organically by contrast, but the general idea is that frequencies are not the basic units of probability. So you could say you can work with them, right? You can work at the superficial level, and you can say, okay, well, what's the probability that so and so is going to get a on base when he's up at bat? You say, oh well, look at his stats. He's batting 327, and that's like a pure statistic, right? It's just in the past he has hit currently 0.327. He's got on base 0.327 times that he's been at bat. And so you think, oh, well, even that, you think that's just pure frequency. The propensity theorist says, well, that might be, you might be able to read those stats off, but really what's going on there is, look at the guy. Look at his swing, look at his strength. Treat him like a machine, right? And you say, well, if you look at this machine, the machine is built in such a way that it's going to generate a certain, propensity to get on base. And there's too many variables there for us to do it. But like, think of Laplace's demon, right? Laplace's demon is essentially physically omniscient, right? And so Laplace's demon, if Laplace's demon knows the position, momentum, velocity, whatever physical characteristics you want of all the atoms in the universe at a given slice in time, and it has a perfect grasp of the laws of physics, it can deduce anytime in the future and anytime in the past exactly what that physical system is going to look like. Okay, so the demon can only do that because we're dealing with a law-governed evolution of the system. The system is the frequencies that the Humean is looking at and saying, okay, this is our constant conjunctions. These are our frequency patterns. Those are just the result of the powers and dispositions of the physical entities that constitute the system. So if you knew that, then those are what underlie the frequencies. The frequencies are just sort of the sign, the smoke of the fire, right? So supposedly the Belgium quarter, or the Belgian equivalent of a quarter, was poorly engineered in that it was slightly asymmetrical in weight about its vertical axis. Okay, I don't know if this is real or lore, but that's how lore has it. And so you could flip the thing, you could do trials, right? And the long run relative frequency of heads would be greater than the long run relative frequency of tails. We can talk about long run relative frequencies and how that is a convergence on a number over time. And you say, oh, see, this is the probability that this is going to be heads being 51% is based on my observation of the last 100 or 1,000 flips. Okay, you can do it that way, but that's not the full story. The story is done by the metaphysics, the intrinsic features, the intrinsic physical features of that system can tell you that, okay, well, we can analyze the coin, we can find its center of mass, see that it's a little bit off center of the geometry of the thing, and say, hey, you know what? I wouldn't be using this to do games of chance, because we can tell by looking at it, it's got a propensity to land heads more often than tails. And you wouldn't ever have to flip the thing if you could analyze the system to that degree, which with a quarter, we obviously could. With the entire universe, that would take Laplace's demon and those demigod-like powers. But both of those things sort of illustrate that the propensity theory of probability puts metaphysics first and deep structure first. And so you can really, probabilities are ultimately grounded in the intrinsic features of systems and entities.
Awesome. That was actually a very succinct explanation. I was expecting it to go longer.
Well, sorry to disappoint.
No. I'm impressed. Okay, well, let's just kind of power through this pinned comment he has on this video, because you and I already agreed this pinned comment means a lot of things for his actual video itself and for the audience. Just think about this as we read through this. So he says, I'll skip all that. Let me clarify here. My argument is not that Bayesian reasoning is useless. My argument is not that Bayesian epistemology is false. Yay.
Well, sorry. Yay, but. Yay, but.
Go ahead. I know what you want. I know what you want to do.
I know you know what I'm going to say. False is not the predicate appropriate to the subject Bayesian reasoning. Now, I don't want to be pedantic, but it's just a good, maybe a little lesson for the kids out there that propositions have truth values. Theories, that Bayesian epistemology is like a theory in a sense. There's a sense in which you could say it's false, but it's too many things to just be stated as false or true. Misleading, riddled with error, conceptually confused. To say it's false is to imply that there is just this thing called Bayesian epistemology that can be boiled down to, say, a big conjunction, and he's saying one of its conjuncts is false. That's a little bit like, okay, it just sort of makes me worry a little bit. But notice this. Think about forget the semantics for a second. Think about the pragmatics of it. Than if I say, if I say to you, my shirt isn't inappropriate for this podcast. Somebody who just walked in the room is going to be like, why did Than say that his shirt was inappropriate? Right? They would have every right to make that assumption. So who said that he said that Bayesian reasoning is useless? Like, I'm not sure anybody ever said that he was saying that. Now, I do think some things you certainly, gather that from what he's saying. Some of the things that he says sort of imply that it's useless, because if you can't sensibly assign values, whether qualitative or quantitative, to the variables, then it is useless, right? Enough on that.
I gotcha. So going on, he says, my argument is not that historical reasoning must use the exact same kind of probability as medical testing. Okay. This is where I think that there's a tension with what he says later, but
let's just be, I'm going to be charitable. I'm going to vacillate between true charity and sort of programmatic charity, just because I'm a fickle person psychologically, and I want to hope the best, and I do want to hope for the best and say that he's kind of come to his senses a little bit, and that this represents his better self. There's a part of me that's very skeptical of that, and just like, he's just trying to dodge a bunch of bullets. But so he says, my argument is not that historical reasoning must use the exact same kind of probability as medical testing. So two things I want to note about that. Think about the phrase exact same kind of probability. Oh, I like that. Because it admits, or at least implies, the possibility that there are multiple kinds of probability. And I think that's exactly right.
Yeah.
I think that's exactly right. I don't think that there's only one kind of probability that is useful. In particular, I think there are subjective probabilities and objective probabilities. I'm inclined to think that objective probabilities all come down to propensities, but maybe not. I'm nothing tied to that. And a wonderful book on this is by Maria Galavati. Has a book called, oh shoot, I think it's called Introduction to Probability. But I think that's what it's called. But it's by Maria Galavati, and it's a great sort of survey of theories of probability. And she, as I recall, defends a sort of limited pluralism, which I think is exactly the right way to go. It uh, which species of probability that one ought to use is relative to the domain of discourse that they're entering into, and the nature of the questions they're trying to answer. So it's inquiry based. You
Are you
know,
talking about her philosophical introduction to probability?
that's it right there. Excellent book,
Yeah, I have it.
wonderful book. If you can link to it, highly, highly recommended.
I'm doing
Very,
right now.
it's extremely well researched, extremely clearly written. It has the scholarly content that any doctoral student could benefit from, but it's written at a level that any bright undergraduate or even high schooler could read and understand. Very, very great book. I love it. Yeah, so
There's only
that's
3 left in stock, guys.
holy smokes. And also, so there's that, right? Pluralism is sort of in the realm here, and that it carves out for historical reasoning to use something different. So we'll just we'll just sort of flag that, right? Okay, well, gosh, we better have a theory of how historical reasoning goes, and more generally, how forensic science works, right? All forensic science, right? Cosmology isn't just like looking in test tubes, right? It's very inferential. Archaeology, paleontology, many domains of rational inquiry are like history in that regard, that they are reconstructive, inferential, and so whatever our epistemology includes, it better include something for all of those species of inquiry, or we're going to have to be a skeptic about those.
Mhm.
Oh, one last little thought. Sorry.
No.
And I think personally, and I hope he agrees, that Christian apologetics or philosophy of religion ought to be held to exactly the same standards.
Yes.
Not lower, not higher. Exactly the same standards. I
Preach.
despise the idea that epistemic standards are lower for religious claims. Not at all. That is getting towards fideism. It is irrational. It is a violation of evidentialism. Boo hiss. But at the same time, you can't make it higher. You have to give religious reason. I mean, first of all, I don't even believe in the category of the religious. Okay, I think that's a myth. But the token arguments of those who do what is called philosophy of religion or apologetics can't be held to a higher standard, because you can't hold them to a standard such that when you export those to another realm of inquiry, that you're left with skepticism there, right?
Mhm.
So that's another thing that I think is sort of on the table in this comment that I want to laud. So yeah.
Well, we can table this for later if you want, because I'm already hearing the pragmatic objection to what you just said, which is just, well, it's held to a higher standard because religious claims have such a big effect on the way I would have to live, stuff like that. Do you want to just table that objection for now?
Let me just say one thing really quickly, I promise.
Yeah, no, go ahead. Oh, no, I'm asking you for your sake, because I saw the stress on your face.
Yeah, no, I get it. So the way that is handled by rational individuals, the pragmatic part of it has nothing to do with epistemology. There's a theory called pragmatic encroachment that tries to bring those pragmatic things into the actual epistemology of how firmly we should believe and whether we know and stuff like it. Garbage. Absolute garbage. My dissertation was actually largely an argument against that. It's just garbage. What's true, the right way to bring pragmatic concerns into decision making is Bayesian decision theory. You have a scale of probabilities for different outcomes, and then you have a scale of utilities, goodness or badness or value in some of those, and then you multiply them, and that product gives you an expected utility of that. And then there are various ways of moving from a ranked order of, of items or values assigned to outcomes to making rational decisions that take into account the importance of the proposition in question. But as in terms of what we believe, that's irrelevant. And the way to know this without the way to have complete confidence in this is to think about, you know, all the cases where you think something probably is not going to happen. And you can underwrite the proposition that this negative outcome is not going to happen by whatever your epistemic standards are, whatever your epistemic theory is. I don't care. On all of them, there are going to be cases where, for some outcome, you are justified or have the proposition that that outcome will not occur has complete positive epistemic status for you. Now, one example of that is you're on a demolition team for a building. You know, those where they push the thing and the buildings just see like implode and collapse, right? You have to check for people in there much more carefully before you demolish a building than if you're just locking the doors for the night, right? If you're just locking up the office for the night and you're like, man, remember malls? Are you old enough to remember malls?
Yeah, we still got malls, right? We still got malls here.
Oh, you're not that far from the Mall of America. And of course, all these movies, right, in the 90s about people being locked inside malls because there's everything in there, right? The most natural thought in the world is, what would it be like to be locked in the mall for the night?
Mm-hmm.
And then the same thing, what's the one where they get locked in the museum? I think it was Robin Williams is in there.
The one with Nick Cage? No.
I don't know, man. They got locked in a museum though, and the museum stuff came alive at night.
I think that was Nick Cage.
You're probably right.
Hold on.
No, you're probably right. I think I'm confusing like Jumanji with this other movie. But some wild actor was in this movie. Anyway, if you're just locking up the mall for the night, you don't have to like go check in every single room. Who really cares? The reality is it'd be kind of cool to be locked in the mall overnight, right? So you could be like, I'm pretty sure there's nobody in there. That's good enough. Well, you could be like 89% sure there's nobody in the building you're demolishing and still have to go check. Not because there's pragmatic encroachment in the standards of knowledge or justified belief or some other positive epistemic status.
It was Ben Stiller. Sorry.
That's hilarious.
I was not expecting.
I wasn't either. Ben Stiller. That's interesting. Okay.
Sorry, it's not.
I think, but I'm picturing, like, I think I have the cover of Jumanji on my case that contains that movie in my imagination, if you know what I mean. You ever do that? You ever get like on a song, you get like the wrong cover?
Yeah.
I had the wrong cover I had the Californication cover to like the wrong Red Hot Chili Peppers album for years. I was like, oh, wait a second, that's a different album. Gosh darn it.
See, look, I just Googled museum movie where things come alive.
That's great. That's great. And it's just called Night in the Museum, something like that.
Yeah.
That's
sorry, guys. We that was a serious thing.
We have to settle this kind of thing, right? We have to settle this kind of thing. Anyway, so you see what I'm saying. I think that's sufficient for any rational person whose publishing career doesn't depend on denying the obvious. That practical concerns do not enter into epistemology; they enter into decision theory, which is itself has as a component an epistemic half, as it were.
Awesome. Okay. So he says, that is not what I argued. The point is this. If an apologist assigns numbers like 90% or 0.01% in a Bayesian argument, those numbers need justification.
Does he think we don't think that?
I think so.
There's no way any authentic, rational player could think that we think that our value judgments or assignments don't require justification.
Well, here's the thing that's not very clear to me. What does he mean by justification? That is a very opaque term. when it comes to this to me.
Yeah, he probably just means you got to say some stuff to give it, to support it epistemically. I'm happy to be.
And
I
so
mean, I
here's
could
the
give you
thing.
13 different definitions of justification if you want it.
No, I understand that. The thing is, in the blog post that he critiques, and the work of mine that he critiques, I do offer justification for a lot of
Mm,
these numbers and explicitly say the full case for any of this is outside of the scope of this blog post.
mhm,
And I
yeah.
link to other places
Mhm.
where I do justify certain things.
But
Because
then that takes work and honesty.
and I also point out that the point of the blog post was didactic about the structure of reasoning,
Yeah.
not the full case in of itself. But
No, that's actually
nonetheless,
a really good point that's going to come up later is that, um, you know, any student that's had about 2 weeks of a logic course in college or even high school for that matter knows the difference between soundness and validity. Validity is the property of an argument such that if the premises are true, then the conclusion must also be true, or it's impossible for the premises to be true and the conclusion to be false. That's a purely formal and structural property, right? You can have all sorts of arguments with false conclusions that have
mhm,
that property of logical validity. Textbooks always illustrate the difference by giving some absurd argument that is nevertheless um, logically valid in that formal logical sense. And then soundness is the property of an argument such that it is both valid and has true premises. And of course, you can modus that ponens to get that argument that is sound has a true conclusion. Um, and so, if it would be crazy to criticize somebody who was teaching a class or a seminar on logical validity and telling them that, well, you're not justifying the truth of your premises. Like, yeah, that's because that's irrelevant to what
mhm.
what logical validity is. You know, it's literally irrelevant. So to the extent that you were discussing the structure of the argument, which clearly you were, because Bayes' theorem, main thing it does is, you know, it's a quotient. It lets you say, okay, what if I make what if I make one of the top multiplicanda bigger? What happens? What if I make the denominator get bigger? What if I make it smaller? Right? It gives you these ratios where you can wiggle and jiggle things and see how the posterior probability changes. That's the maybe the coolest thing about Bayes' theorem and Bayesian reasoning generally is that you can say, okay, well, let's see what makes a difference to what. And then, of course, you can then plug those likelihoods into, um, you know, you can form likelihood ratios that can be translated into, you know, a scale of epistemic status. Not without controversy in terms of the exact, you know, what the numbers exactly mean, but that's what they're for. It's
Yeah.
for the structure is what's really important. And we'll get into it in a little bit, but that also should hint to you that there is an objectivity part of the Bayesian world, and there is a subjectivity part of the Bayesian world, just as there is logical validity and soundness. So, but I'll save that until he brings that up, kind of.
Yeah. So then he says calling them epistemic probabilities does not solve the problem. Nobody's saying what they are.
So it's
Um,
such a weird thing to say. I mean, I guess it's, yeah, I don't know. I guess that statement is warranted only if nobody ever gives a theory of epistemic probability, but that's blatantly false. There's
yeah,
insane.
somebody commented to him saying that epistemic probability is subjective probability, and then they linked him Klemenhaga's two papers because they know that I follow Klemenhaga when he says that epistemic probabilities are degrees of support, not just mere degrees of belief.
Yeah, well, I think it's both actually.
Yeah.
I think both properties exist. I think propositions have um, are related by degrees of objective logical or evidential support. I also believe that uh, that a probability structure governs the degrees of belief of a rational entity. Those are two separate things, right?
Mhm.
And it's not like an objectivist versus a subjectivist.
Yeah,
There's
both
two.
can be.
there's two different questions. One question is, um, given that I have this distribution of confidence across this set of propositions, what does that commit me to with respect to these other propositions, right? And then a separate question is, to what extent in objective reality does this proposition support that proposition? And sometimes that's a pretty easy question to answer, and other times it's difficult. But they're just separate questions, and you might think there are no objective probabilities. That'd be pretty weird, right? That'd be pretty weird to think there are no objective probabilities.
No, the only
There's,
objective probabilities are frequencies.
yeah, it's not clear that those can actually be probabilities, but that's fine. But again, suppose you think that.
I'm not. By the way, I'm not attributing that to Shen.
Yeah,
By the way,
yeah.
I'm also gesturing towards the skeptical.
Yeah, there's people.
That
Yeah,
like that
people,
in general.
people like that, but that's a separate question. You could believe you could believe either there's no such thing as objective probability, or the only objective probabilities are frequentist type statements, and also think that, like deductive logic, probability logic, which I think is just really a refinement, a generalization of deductive logic, can tell you, okay, so you could say, okay, so suppose I believe the disjunction P or Q, and I believe that P entails R, and I believe that Q entails R. Now, suppose I believe that, the proposition P or Q, and I believe, what should I believe about R, right? You can, that's how deductive logic helps you figure out, what am I committed to? What must a rational being think? What must a finite agent, what must be the structure of a finite agent's beliefs to count as rational, right? The laws of deductive logic are conditions of adequacy on a noetic structure counting as rational. A minimal structure, being consistent with first order logic. But the laws of probability do that as well. I mean, think about one of the legends of 20th century probability, Richard Jeffrey, his most popular book on the subject is called Subjective Probability: The Real Thing. and he's so clear that he's like, look, this is a kind of logic, and if your if your degrees of confidence are distributed in this way about these propositions, then you're committed to this. And if you don't have these probabilities, there's something wrong with your belief system, possibly with you. And Dutch book arguments are meant to kind of show that, and there's other sort of consistency theorems. But that's an evaluation of an individual agent's noetic structure, right? The other is an evaluation of the relationship between various propositions. They're both totally legitimate areas of inquiry, and to suggest that somehow objectivity and objectivism and subjectivism are somehow opposed to one another is ludicrous and shows ignorance of the literature.
All right, let's keep moving on. He says they're qualitative likelihood judgments. I know that already. So, like, really quickly, all of this, that this video could have been like 10 minutes long at that
That's
point.
right. You'd be struggling to turn this script into 10 minutes.
Because here's all that he needs to say then in a video. Than didn't adequately justify the comparative likelihood judgments.
Yeah, right. That's it. Good
He
night,
doesn't
folks.
do that.
Good night, folks.
He doesn't do that. And there's a bunch of stuff in the video where he talks about how Bayesian reasoning can go wrong. He gestures towards Texas sharpshooter fallacies and all this other stuff, but never shows how I do any of that. And yeah, anyway, let's keep going. So it says, now justify the judgments. Why should the resurrection reports be 90% expected if Jesus was resurrected? Why should those reports only be 0.01 expected if Jesus is not resurrected?
I think those are perfectly acceptable questions, and yeah. I'd kind of like to put those like to put those on the shelf and come back to them, because that's kind of the heart of ultimately what you and I are about, is wanting to consider the probability of these of these sorts of judgments, and they're sort of the particularities or where the rubber meets the road. So I'd like to put them on a shelf and come back to them after we've continued going through the rest of them and establishing sort of the theoretical framework, if you don't mind.
Yeah. Then he says, saying 0.01% means the evidence would be extremely surprising under the resurrection, only translates the number into words. Does not explain why we should accept that judgment. I agree.
Yeah, it's true. Saying does only translates the number into words. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know why. I don't know why anybody would think otherwise. Because given the numbers, the numbers are there to illustrate the ways
qualitative
that
force.
Yeah, the different ways Bayes' theorem changes when you wiggle this lever, pull this lever, or pull the other lever, right? The numbers, and the numbers represent things like high or low, very high, very low. Nobody's like arguing that these numbers are the numbers, right? These are not God's probabilities. These represent a statement, these represent sort of like orders of magnitude, right? So you have to think about, you take paradigm cases, right? And you think, okay, well, how surprising would that be? And how would this compare to that, right? So if you can think about things like, how surprising would it be if you pulled the ace of spades out of a deck of cards on the first try? That'd be pretty surprising, right? That'd be pretty surprising. You might think that the probability of that is 1/52nd, 1 in 52. That's a reasonable thing to think, right? So a little less than 2%, right? So you think that's pretty dang surprising. Like, it's not like, oh my God, right? But you're like, huh, how about that? That's weird. So that's like, a 2% probability thing. And then you think, how much weirder would it be if all these people were claiming this resurrection if it didn't happen? You're like, well, this is more than this is weirder than pulling a certain card out of a deck, right? Well, how much more? It's like, well, many times more weird than that.
Yeah.
I'm sure people are pulling, picking cards at random and being pulled out of decks. I'm sure that's happened to many people. But like, is it as shocking as guessing the winning lottery numbers? Probably not, right? If you understand how small those small those probabilities are. And so you think, okay, well, we at least have some bounds, maybe it's at the median point between picking a card at random and getting it right and picking the winning lottery numbers. So all they're doing is sort of establishing like this sort of interval and say, okay, it's, and then you can maybe think harder and narrow that interval, or maybe it just stays that wide. And because you can do decision theory with intervals. I studied directly with Henry Keiberg. In fact, I was Henry Keiberg's last student, and he was really big. He had a whole semantics for probability functions that issued intervals as the judgments. And so that's fine. And it'll also give you the ability to run over-unders, right? You can say the probability of the resurrection reports happening if the resurrection didn't happen seemed to me to be between here and here. And so you can run it at the low, you can run it at the high, and you get an outcome that is in that range. And all the apologist needs is that, hey man, on any reasonable assignment, mirabile dictu, it turns out the resurrection is crazy high as a posterior if you pick anything reasonable for the initial assignments, right? That's what the structural discussion is about. It has nothing to do with getting a precise number. It's like we are establishing some intuitive ranges for these things occurring, but just by comparing them to other things.
Yep. And to be fair, I don't do the range thing in the blog post because, again, it's just about the structure of reasoning. Like my full-fledged resurrection case, I'm just not going to type that all out.
Yes.
now.
Yeah. There's this thing on the internet where it's like either your blog post should be a 3-volume, book
Yeah.
or nothing, right? So people jump. It used to be that you could say, "Here are my introductory remarks, and I will unpack and unfold as people have questions," right?
Yep.
But now it's like you make your opening remarks, and somebody's like, "Well, yeah, but how do you justify, additivity in the Kolmogorov axioms?" You're like, "Can we start here and
Yeah.
get there? I mean, can we take something for granted?
Yeah. No,
So
and I like for instance, I did a Bayesian argument against Islam, and I did the ranges. I did the ranges. Um, so I do like that solution. I also really like the solution of just running 2 different models for the priors as well.
yeah.
But anyway,
And do you live in Wisconsin? Oh, I shouldn't say that. I think
well,
suppose you lived in Minnesota or in the Twin Cities, which you don't. Um, you may not be able to publish if you publish that because they're kind of under Sharia law now. They've got the blasphemy laws in
mhm.
Minnesota. You might be arrested for that blog post in Minnesota. You certainly would be in the UK, right? Certainly, you'd be arrested in the UK for that,
Oh
or
man, yeah, don't.
detained and questioned at least.
Yeah, it's crazy out there. Um, we're already at 46 minutes. My goodness. Okay, let's try to speed this up.
Yes,
I'm getting tired already. Okay.
I'm not. I'm getting amped
He
up.
says the issue is not whether apologists are allowed to use Bayesian reasoning. The issue
Thank
is
you
whether
so
the inputs
much.
they put into the calculation are actually supported. Great, we all agree. A hunch is not evidence.
That's
Well,
not actually true.
no, yeah, I was just gonna say it's not true.
Absolutely not
The
true.
intuition is evidence. So
Yeah, absolutely. And if you think about what the Bayesian theory of evidence, it's pretty obvious that a hunch is evidence.
yeah,
Now, how much evidence it is will depend on some extraneous factors. But like all you have to do is run the likelihoods. Is it more likely that I would have the hunch given that it's true, or more likely that I have the hunch given that it's false? We have hunches all the time that are just the subconscious grasping of certain kinds of information, sort of coming up on consciousness and sort of lighting up, like, hey, look over here,
yeah,
right?
like our
And
intuitive cognition.
yeah, yeah, and a hunch is just a really low level intuition, maybe, or there's a spectrum, right, that starts at a hunch and goes through suspicion and ends at something's seeming intuitively correct, and we've got no other place to start than what seems to us to be correct. I mean, if like take modus ponens, why apply modus ponens? Well, it sure seems right. I mean, like you got nothing else, right? You can't escape it. Give me an argument for modus ponens. Here's my favorite argument for modus ponens.
Why is the external world real? I mean, oh,
Yeah. Somebody be like, well, modus ponens is reliable because, when you do the truth table, they try to be real smart, right? When you do the truth table on the corresponding conditional, it's true in all cases. And I'm like, oh, okay. So what you're saying is, if a well-formed formula of a inferential rule is true in every case, then it's reliable. Modus ponens has those properties. Therefore, oops, I just did modus ponens to support modus ponens, right? I
yeah,
mean, it's just we either we have the faculty of rational intuition or we don't. You've got to have an epistemology of logic, and good luck doing that without giving credence to the faculty of rational intuition. And again, we have propositions sort of light up for us in various ways in various circumstances, and we've got absolutely no other place to start at all. Nowhere, no other place to start. Can you hear my dog whining?
no,
Okay, good. So yeah, that's it. That's a separate debate. I'm happy to debate the evidential weight of intuitions all day long. Find me another place to start.
no, I love it. Okay, another thing I would say is half right, half wrong. A theological expectation is not evidence. So I would say that's half right, half wrong, in the sense that like
I see what
it
you're saying.
seems like the illocution here is that theological expectations just have nothing to do with our probability calculus, right?
Mhm.
And if that's the elocution, I would say that's wrong, because if in my background knowledge I have a miracle projecting theism, well, that's going to have massive implications
Yeah,
to my likelihood ratio,
yeah.
right? And
I
to
mean,
my expectations.
it's so obvious. I mean, just think of this toy theory. Um, if there's a God, if there were a God, then probably there would be some miracles, or it wouldn't be too improbable that there would be miracles.
Hmm.
And I'm, X confident that there's a God, so it's not hard to do the math on the expectation of miracles is,
As
you
a type.
know, high or not low,
Yeah.
right? What kind of person is going to say that the existence of God is not, think about what statistical irrelevance means or probabilistic irrelevance means, or it is that so A is irrelevant to B if the probability of B given A is equal to the probability of B,
Hmm.
right? It's the inverse of the definition of probability that, or of evidence, that E is evidence for P, just in case the probability of P given E is greater than probability of P. Now, there are some, you might have to put some, caveats on there for analytic philosophy, but that's the basic idea. And so does he think that the proposition that God exists is irrelevant
Surely he
to
doesn't.
the proposition that certain miracles have occurred? I mean, that's just, come on, man. But if it's not irrelevant, then it is relevant, and it's
Hmm.
called the relevance definition of evidence in Bayesian epistemology.
Yep.
So again, this is just nobody could say this who was cognizant of the relevant literature. You just couldn't say it.
Yeah. It says, and a subjective judgment does not become rigorous just because you put it in a Bayes theorem. Nobody's acting like that. There's something like, I mean,
It depends on what he means by rigorous. I mean, it absolutely becomes rigorous if you use probability logic to deduce the impact of that subjective judgment on every other proposition that you're considering. Can you let her out to go potty? Thanks. Gotta let
well,
the dog out.
correct me if I'm wrong, Trent, but even in the scientific literature, they use subjective judgments in certain cases, in certain Bayesian cases too, for epistemic probability.
Well, what do you mean? What, can you give me an example?
Not off the top of my head. I can find a paper where they're talking about ways to go about using what they coin as subjective probability when there's not enough data to use for Bayesian statistical models.
Yeah, I mean, something that might be close to that is
I'll find it.
Richard Jeffrey, who's one of my heroes, the best collection of his essays called Probability and the Art of Judgment, which is an essay in there by that title. And I love that idea, the art of judgment. For Dick Jeffrey, the assignment of probabilities to propositions is an art, an Aristotelian techne. It's not objective in the sense, I mean, it can be objective. So think of David Lewis's principle, that if you know the objective chance of an outcome, say the decay rate of a radioisotope is
Mhm.
X, then your credence in that should also be X, right? You should always match your subjective probability. You should set your subjective probabilities, your credences, equal to the ratios of outcomes that you're certain of. I mean, that's the obvious way of connecting subjective and objective probability to David Lewis's principle. But that sort of, you can get shades of gray there, right? So he talks about how, like, nurses are better at assigning probabilities to outcomes and conditional probabilities in many cases than your layman is, right? And it's
Mhm.
not because they've kept track of frequencies. It's because they've taken in a lot of experience, and their mental apparatus has then endowed upon them an ability, a capability, a virtue
Yeah.
of making judgments of probability, of assigning probabilities to outcomes that is just better than other people's, right? So it's not even purely subjective in a way
Yeah.
in Dick Jeffrey's work. And the same way with a scientist, right? A good scientist that has a lot of experience in their domain is going to be able to make better probability judgments than lay people because of their experience and expertise, even though they can't give you some algorithm or handbook, right? That says if here are the features and those correspond to these probabilities. No, it's a subtle thing. And I think that that's true of every domain. And I think it's also true of the theological domain. And I think that to deny that is just to deny the obvious.
Yeah. The thing I was thinking about is there's I can send you the paper, some of these papers if you want. They call it expert elicitation, and it speaks to the thing
Mm,
that you were talking about, right?
mm,
It's like experts
awesome.
in particular fields use epistemic probability when there's not that much data.
Okay,
And it's expert elicitation because they have kind of a working mastery of
perfect.
the atomic propositions,
Perfect.
basically, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, because that's subjective in the sense that it's coming from the individual, but it is really objective in the sense that it's grounded in real world experience.
yes.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that's perfect. I'd love it if you'd send me that because that ties into Jeffrey's work perfectly. I'd love to
Yeah,
read
I'll
that.
send you a few things on that, if you want.
Awesome.
Okay, so he says, "Let me put it to you straight," and this is the part that is crazy to me. You
Mm.
can't justify those values beyond your hunch. You just can't. So he's asking us to justify them, then saying we can't, and then says this is the one major reason historians generally do not make historical judgments that a miracle actually happened. So
Ugh.
and then he says it's not because historians are closed-minded, it is because the updating process lacks the kind of independent evidence, real-world precedent, and reliable background data needed to justify that move. When the event is ordinary, we have background knowledge to work with. When the event is a miracle, especially something like resurrection, the crucial probabilities are not established by historical data. They are usually supplied by theology, intuition, or apologetic judgment. So, all of this
This is just like
contradicts by my lights, right? Where is it? This.
what's the
Same
first?
probability as miracle testing, medical testing,
Yeah.
because that's the only way I can interpret all like this post in a way that's coherent.
Mhm.
Maybe you can find a way because if the resurrection doesn't have to be based off of statistical probability, then then we are allowed to use theological expectation, philosophy, arguments for that are a priori, all this other stuff to increase our priors and likelihood judgments and all this other stuff, are we not?
Yeah, this is really weird. This is really weird. So first of all, the like you just can't. Um, well, why not? And then his why not is, first of all, this is one major reason historians generally do not make historical judgments that a miracle actually happened.
It's actually not
Um,
why, by the way. This has nothing to do with what historians are doing. Historians are just bound to a methodological
yeah,
naturalism.
for sure. And he says it's not because they're closed minded. Well, it kind of is, isn't it?
They're by fiat.
Yeah.
They're by fiat. Their methodology, right? By fiat assigns a zero prior to miracles.
They'll even say this. So-called historians like the sort of Jesus seminar folks, they'll just outright say it. I mean, they it's not like we came up with this term methodological naturalism and then we like attribute this bogeyman for them. I've got passages highlighted where they proudly proclaim it, right? Like
Mhm.
this is what makes it us awesome is that we're methodological naturalists. It's just, it's like the air that historians breathe. And it's not like historians have historiography classes most of the time. I bet you not 1% of historians have taken a single class in historiography, read a single book on historiography, or read a single article in historiography. I would bet you a dollar to a dime on that. They're just
Mhm.
sort of
I
they're
Trent,
swimming in the water, man.
Trent,
There's
here's the funny thing, man. A lot of the historians that the skeptical atheists and skeptics and stuff like that want to punt to as their authorities, I've talked to privately about this very thing that
Yeah.
you just brought up about
Yeah.
historiography, and how I think theory comparison in biblical scholarship, especially, is just really bad.
Oh,
It's
it's terrible.
riddled with methodological issues, and I've
Whew.
had every single skeptical historian that's not a Christian that I've talked to privately agree with me on this.
Yeah, it was hard to deny because they're not really, they're not, I hate to say they're not trained to reason, but they're, especially biblical criticism is such a sui generis pseudo discipline to start with, right? When I was a young classics major studying Greek and Latin at the University of Missouri, I had this ambition to like reclaim biblical studies for classics departments because here I was, a pretty decent classic scholar for an undergrad. I mean, I was very well regarded by my professors in the classics department. Um, and and I loved what they did, right? And it was very rational. And then you would go look at this biblical study stuff, and it was like, well, this is make believe. They're just the thing called biblical studies, other than like Grant. What's that guy's name? Grant from a million years ago. I think
I
he
have
wrote a
no
book.
clue what you're talking about.
No, I'll think of it later. He was big back in the 90s. But for the most part, it was clearly this pantomime, right? It's kind of like woke degrees or degrees that end in studies. Almost all, biblical studies is like women's studies and peace studies and all this other, fake garbage nonsense, blah blah that's just made up. It's a play, right? It's children dressing up in adult clothes and pantomiming. It's silliness, and it's really, really, really gross, nasty, trashy pseudo scholarship. Bart Ehrman stuff, I was like, so I asked a few atheists, I'm like, so who do you read that's influential to you? Because I'm happy to read it. I want to see what you're being influenced. And Bart Ehrman's name came up the most. I read it, and I was like, what? Like this is like Ken Ham level stuff, right? I'm not going to stand up for Kim Ham just because he's a Christian. I'm going to be like, no, this guy's a bozo, right? And his young earth stuff and his Ken Ham's work is garbage, right? And any self-respecting atheist should say that Bart Ehrman stuff's garbage. It's absolute blah blah, it's appalling that it counts as scholarship. So I'm just gonna and I'll argue all of that on the merits, right? So if he wants to have a debate about the actual historiography, implicit and explicit in biblical studies, hey, let's do a debate on that. Let's do a whole series on that, right? Because we'll win that every single day. It's because the updating process lacks the kind of independent evidence. What's independent evidence?
Yeah,
I literally don't know what that people use that phrase. Independent of what? Like what is it even? Do you have? Well, in theory, what do you think it's supposed to mean? Independent of what? Like my beliefs? Well, every person has beliefs. I have no idea what independent evidence is supposed to mean.
So, but I think what they're trying to do when they say stuff like this is something like maybe when it comes to an auxiliary, right? That helps sustain your main core hypothesis. So you have resurrection, and then say there's an auxiliary that, for instance, like for me, I have my theodicy, and I think the theodicy that I give highly predicts an incarnation and the defeat of death, right? And so I use that as a means to kind of pump up a little bit the priors for an incarnation and resurrection.
I suppose you're independent. You're independently convinced of that theory.
Right.
You've come to that theory by reasoning through the options.
Yeah. So there's also another
You
argument
should
that I
never
give.
use independent evidence ever. The
Wait,
only
what?
good kind of evidence is relevant evidence. Independent.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I just don't know what that phrase means. I think it's just like a catchphrase that.
Is there any kind of super chat or live comments or anything on this?
Yeah, we got some super chats. Did you want to go through them for a sec?
Not just yet, if you don't mind.
Okay.
But if somebody wants to try to tell me what independent evidence is supposed to be, it's one of those it's one of those catchphrases that's just, it's a veiled jab of like, you're begging the question. Well, what is that? That's the worst objection ever. No, I've just got my arguments. You tell me where my premises go wrong. You know, independent. That's a weasel word. It's wimpy.
I'm gonna see. I'm just Googling independent evidence. What does independent evidence mean? Let's see what comes up.
While you do that, I'm going to say real world precedents. Well, if God is real and God has acted in the world, then God's actions are part of the real world precedent. And if my religious experience is part of the real world, and people's responses to the religious and responses of awe to certain states of affairs is part of the world, and that's real world precedent. I mean, isn't it begging the question to say that religious propositions don't have real world precedent? Or miracles don't have real world precedent? That would only be the case if there were no other miracles that had occurred. But that's the conclusion. That shouldn't be the premise.
So, yeah. So, in scientific contexts, independent evidence means verifying a finding using entirely different data sets, studies, or observers.
It's basically not using circular reasoning, right?
Yeah.
So I challenge this guy to show where we're using circular reasoning. Circular reasoning is typically bad. There are some people that argue for some, benign cases of circular reasoning. There are coherence arguments and certain kinds of internal support. That's fine. I don't have a problem with that, but not circular reasoning. If he wants to make an accusation of circular reasoning, it's on him to demonstrate it. He has to actually say this is the proposition that they're using as evidence, and that's actually something that there's an inference up here. So reliable background data. Again, he's begging the question.
But like my reliable background data I give in the blog post.
Yeah.
I go over prior reasons for thinking. This is the thing that anyway. Well,
when the event is ordinary, we have background knowledge to work with. Well, so what about just highly improbable events? Winning the lottery, getting a hole in one, meeting your best friend in China on a visit, ordinariness. If ordinariness just means something that has happened a lot, then read it like this. When an event type is tokened frequently, we have background knowledge to work with. When an event type is rarely tokened, crucial probabilities are not established by historical data. Well, that's not true. It just reads obviously false if you're just talking about rare events. So I don't think he knows what a miracle is. So, and I do, by the way, I think it's highly incumbent upon Christians right now to get back out there in talking about the theory of miracles and what a miracle is.
Oh, I do.
Richard, because of the resurgence of arguments from particular miracles like Cameron Bertuzzi, I don't know if it's on Capturing Catholicism or Capturing Christianity, but had Ethan, the guy Ethan, I forget yeah, and and then we were we together on a podcast with the other guy that did?
We were on. Yeah, you, me, and Caleb were on. We weren't going over Catholic specific miracles.
Yeah,
but Caleb and I put
actual, not just the resurrection, but token
miracles.
Right. So that thing coming back is quite interesting. But I do think that we ought, now that sort of reasoning is coming back, we, the philosophical Christian community, need to start talking again. Hey, let's be clear about what a miracle is. And it's pretty interesting that I'm pretty sure that Richard Swinburne's first theological publication was a book called, or he probably did it as an article first, called The Concept of Miracle. And most of yes, absolutely. Look up the publication.
I read everything by Swinburne.
Dude, only I and Swinburne have done that. Only me and Richard have read everything that Richard's written.
Miracle.
Actually, there's a guy at Oxford that probably has. I forget his name right now, but I did not get tapped as Richard's literary executor. I'm not supposed to. Telling you, man. What's publication date? 1976? 19... No.
$75? Dang. For sure.
Yeah, it's expensive. I've got a copy. When was it published?
I'm
68 to 72?
trying to find it.
Just ask the internet.
I know I Googled it in 1970.
Okay, I was in the right ballpark. I said 68
Yeah.
to 72. Did you hear me say 68 to 72? And 70 is right in the damn middle of that. How
Yeah.
good am I, man? No, I know my Swinburne canon pretty well.
It's pretty crazy.
Yeah. So I think it's really incumbent upon us to talk more about the concept of a miracle and be clear about what we're talking about. Because I think the greater clarity we have in expressing what a miracle is, the more it will reveal how these sort of like stupid, just throwaway statements are completely wide of the mark. They're just not educated, right?
Hmm. So now, this is where I'm struggling, Trent, because at the end of the day, it's like that pinned comment is what we need to address, and
Yep.
we need to circle back to, because
Yes.
the rest of the video really, like, he brings up demons and makes the
Just all blah
supernatural
blah.
natural distinction, even though I don't know about
I
you,
don't,
but I deny that
nope.
distinction because
No such distinction.
yeah,
It's
I think
irrelevant.
all it does is artificially bloats and doesn't actually provide any meaningful categories.
Yeah.
Of
I'm
difference.
supernatural. You're supernatural.
Yeah.
Our minds directly intervene in the flow of physics, and every time we make a free will, every time we make a choice, there's a miracle in the sense of a violation of the laws of nature.
Yeah. So it's
In
up.
that
I
sense of
mean,
miracle.
should we just cover the likelihood assessments then, and go back to the thing you wanted to circle back to? What do you think would be best here?
I would really rather say something about. I'd really rather end by considering before that putting. I'd like that to be the cherry on top, but I'd like to have the end segment be based on a real recognition of the legitimacy of what he's asking,
Oh yeah,
because
yeah.
because even Christians can ask. Suppose you're a Christian and you're one of these like guys you've read like existentialists, and you're like, continental philosophy, like, okay, you just read crappy long poetry, right? It's just like, no, poetry doesn't get to become philosophy just by being super long and having polysyllabic terminology. Hey, I like Husserl, by the way. So he, the legitimate question by anybody, regardless of religious affiliation or inclination, is, hey, how do we assign probabilities to what God's actions would be, right? Because a Christian could be wondering about this from a lot of different angles. They could have read the skeptical theist literature, which is on an IQ to crap level, probably the highest ever, because it's like got super smart people saying stuff that is just like, how can you say this is like so bad? It's an example of like intelligence used creatively to like defend the indefensible, right? Skeptical theism's in most of its standard forms is just garbage, and its true forms is just like obvious common sense. But the idea that we cannot sensibly assign probabilities to any action God would take and some of the stuff is just crazy. Except when it's in the Bible somehow, right? Then it's
Right.
okay.
Or well, you could wait, because if I heard you right, you said the idea that we can't assign probabilities to any actions God would do, right? That's
That's
ridiculous.
it's
The
ridiculous.
the thing is, on the skeptics end, they don't actually think that either, right? Because we have the problem of evil, problem of divine hiddenness,
Oh, for
all
sure.
this
If
other
you
stuff.
are, yeah, they're inconsistent. They're inconsistent, but that never stopped anybody from happening. You know, when has that been a barrier to believing what you want to believe? You know.
Fair enough.
But it's really important to me to talk about, hey, how do we make these judgments? Maybe you're a young Christian or an old Christian, young in philosophy. You think this is kind of weird. These guys are, using math and you have this sort of natural piety of like God's ways are higher than our ways and that sort of thing. So
Mhm.
how can I dare to think that I, kind of know what God would do? I think a very easy answer to that, that is not impious at all, and is not and not lacking in justification at all. Because you just have to think what kind of entity is God? Now, I'm not talking about, the full blown version of the God of Abraham, Abraham, Isaac, and
Abraham.
Jacob. Abraham. Hey, it's spelled Ibrahim, right? Come on now.
I know you're good.
I was seeing it written, Ibrahim. There is a robustness to the full concept of God that outstrips our ability to nicely define it. But God is at least capturable by the human intellect by his powers of being omnipotent and omniscient, right? And any being that's omnipotent and omniscient is also going to be omnibenevolent, because they're going to know the objective value of every outcome, and they're going to be by being omnipotent, they're going to be immune to acrosia or other vices and weaknesses of will that keep people from subjectively valuing states of affairs according to their perception of their objective value. And his being omniscient means that the value that he perceives in things is always accurate. And so the explanatory power of theism, which is the chapter title in Richard Swinburne's The Existence of God, that really is the key that unlocks all of this. So if you're out there and you're saying, hey, give me something to read that would unpack all this, it would be the chapter called The Explanatory Power of Theism in Richard Swinburne's book, The Existence of God, which I summarized in a little video called The Explanatory Power of Theism. I think it's a two-part thing. And God is a person, or if you don't like that phraseology, God is a personal being. God has an intellect and a will. Now, by the doctrine of divine simplicity, you might think that they sort of like become one and merge in God, but he still has the volitional aspect, right? He has the intellectual aspect. Otherwise, we wouldn't say God is all-knowing and always wills the good, right? So just set your divine simplicity concerns to the side. They're not relevant here.
Mhm.
God is still a personal being, and a personal being of a particular kind, one with no limits. And so it's not that hard to make predictions about that kind of being, because that type of being is going to make choices on the basis of value. That being is going to will outcomes in proportion to their goodness. Now, this might have concerns of incommensurability. That's a separate philosophical issue to set to the side. And there's going to be cases where there's like, okay, there's maybe there's many equal there's many uh, generic sets of outcomes that have approximately equal value. Okay, that just tells you what God's options are, but it certainly limits things, right? And God will things into being in proportion to their goodness. And so if you have your predictions of what God would do are based on your judgments of the goodness of outcomes, your axiology.
Mhm.
So think about it this way. So make that, give me some time and I'll make that statement, tight and tidy and pretty, that God's actions are predictable in virtue of the intrinsic goodness of those outcomes. And then the proposition that you can't predict God's actions becomes something like, you can't grasp the objective structure of value. See what I'm saying?
Mhm.
So skeptical theism, or skepticism about theistic actions, whether from misled, misguided Christians or atheists, really becomes moral skepticism.
Mhm. No, I like
So
that.
so if you're
That's why I didn't
not,
I'm not cutting you off. Keep preaching,
yeah.
Trent.
So
I'm just
so so if you're not a moral skeptic, then whatever outcomes you think would be better, those are more likely given God's existence. That's why the problem of evil is at least prima facie a problem, right? Because why would a good God allow bad things?
Mm-hmm.
Good, bad, no fit, right? Well, but the inverse of that, as it were, is good things match good God, you know? This isn't that hard.
And
And
we
so,
also have this concept of bad thing gets retroactively endorsed. But we can
yeah,
set aside for now.
bad parts can be parts of good wholes,
Yep.
right? And so that's why my theodicy in the animal pain book, The Problem of Animal Pain, available now. You can link to it if you want.
It's a well, we always talk about it. We always say it's a
Okay.
must read.
So in there, I lay out this idea that it's axiology that drives the prediction, and I'm just unpacking stuff, basically from Richard, um, and so you think, okay, well, I make psychological predictions all the time, right? I make predictions about the behaviors of people all the time, and it doesn't have to be based on just my observation of their past behavior. It can be based on my knowledge of their intrinsic character, right? And since I believe in the propensity theory of probability, which I was prepared to go into ad nauseum, which will have to be either a separate video or just Google propensity theory of probability, because I'm a propensity theorist about probability. Like, just think back to my concept of the Belgian coin and Laplace's demon, right?
Mm-hmm.
When if I could know, so Than, I claim that I can predict your behavior accurately under various circumstances when I've never observed you in those circumstances at all. I boldly claim that because I know your character well enough to know what your dispositions are going to be. You're going to have a propensity to perform this sort of action in this sort of circumstance, and that sort of action in that sort of circumstance, right? Psychological, personal explanation. You're an agent that acts for a reason. A reason is a perceived good, right? When you perceive some outcome as good, its perceived goodness motivates you to seek that outcome, and it is the reason, the explanatory reason for your taking that action in motion towards that outcome, right?
I would even push that even a little further. Like, you can ask Tim. This is an anecdote. This is a he said, she said to you probably right now, but for the audience. But you can ask Tim. Tim and I have had private conversations about sociological stuff in general, right? Where I'm looking at populations in particular niche groups, and I've made predictions about how things are going to play out based on my knowledge of psychology, and it most of the time comes to pass. So I don't even have to know you that well, to make a prediction about what you're going to do.
There's certain generalizations about human nature, right?
Yeah.
And I'm even going to say there is no category. Hear me. There is no category of explanation that we know better and are better at than psychological personal explanation. Partly because we know that directly and immediately through the observation of our own psychology. Do we have perfect, transparent understanding of our own mental states? No, we do not. We do not need that for that type of judgment to be the most accurate and intimately known type of judgment and prediction that we make, right? So that's part of what grounds those judgments. You want to know what grounds those judgments? Our value judgments ground those personal judgments through a method of explanation and prediction that we use more than any other. There's no other type of prediction or explanation that we make more frequently, at least consciously and about non-trivial things, than psychological explanation or personal explanation. This person performed this action for that reason. And what do we mean by a reason other than they perceive that outcome as good and believe that means that action would bring about that good, right? And so I think it's highly likely that God would create a world, that any world God would create would have a tremendous amount of, let's say, opportunity for suffering in it, because only through suffering are the highest goods achievable. And the highest goods I judge to be things like love, mercy, magnanimity, generosity, courage, these sorts of virtues, right? So once I identify that axiology, then predicting God's behavior just falls right out of it. It's literally, you can make an algorithm for it, right? And so you can say, oh, well, I disagree with your axiology, in fact, maybe you want to turn your head, I don't care. But whatever your axiology is, whatever is at its apex, that is what would be predicted by a being who knows perfectly the value of every outcome and desires every outcome in proportion to its goodness. It's not that hard.
The thing is, Trent, I outline that in my blog.
Really?
Yeah. Well, yeah, because at the end of my blog post, which he says he read because he critiques it, I pretty explicitly outline, God's gonna be. I do this in a really pop level way, and I'll in a pop level way something like this, right? If God exists, He's gonna do the best kinds of actions. But now I have to ask the question: what is the best kind of action? Well,
Mm-hmm.
that question will be answered through your axiology, right?
Mm-hmm.
The best kinds of actions. You're gonna know what those are based off of your value theory.
Yeah, and if he's a rational actor and if he's sincere and if he's authentic, then maybe he'll go back and reread that and be like, okay, now I understand why you said all these things, right? So charitably, we could say he just hasn't read it, because you could miss that, right? If you're not looking for it, you could be like, I don't understand why he's talking about this stuff. You might miss that. And so, the thing he should read is Richard Swinburne's chapter, The Explanatory Power of Theism. And then he should read my chapter called, or maybe it's a section of a chapter called The Narrative Approach to Probability.
Yep.
That we get probabilities because of the way that events are embedded in narratives. And humans are freaking amazing at narrative, right?
It's almost like our whole identity is in there.
Yeah, absolutely. And almost like that, right? And we judge the plausibility of plots, even in fiction, because of how able we are to grasp narrative structures, right? And one narrative structure is our account of the way the world is,
Mm-hmm.
and the way people are, and the values of outcomes. And so in the section called the narrative account of probability, or a narrative approach to probability, I try to unpack a little bit this idea that, yeah, we make probability judgments all the time on the basis of narrative structure. And like, part of what makes a really bad piece of fiction is like when characters do things that are out of character with their character, right? You're like, nah, Sherlock wouldn't have done that. That's ridiculous. And some of the best ones are when you see, oh, now I see how Sherlock did that. Now I see how it emanates from his character. Now I get it. And I think that's a lot what theodicy is like. And certainly in my book, that's the way I present it, is like, okay, yeah, prima facie, you think, what the hell, but the more you think about it, you're like, okay, so this is God's character. And then this is how the world is, and this is how the pattern of the extent and depth of evil and suffering is, and this is how it, and you're like, okay, now I get it. And certainly with the resurrection, you're like, okay, well, it is certainly not initially improbable that God would perform a super miracle. So now I'm looking at Richard Swinburne's book, The Resurrection of God Incarnate.
Mm-hmm.
And then again in there, if you want to read a book-length treatment of it, he's like, look, here's my reasons for thinking that God would perform a super miracle to endorse. Here's reasons for thinking that God would, descend into the world. It doesn't even have to be like, oh, God would surely do this. It could be like,
no,
that wouldn't be that surprising. I can see why God might do that, right? And so maybe we assign that 10%, 5%.
Oh no! You want to know the horrible
1%?
sin that I committed, Trent?
What's that?
I said it's 1 in a million, but
sure.
I said that it's 1 in a million, but I think it's closer to like 4.5%. That's the sin that I committed.
Shame on you, man. No, but see, the thing is, any cooperative conversational interlocutor is going to be like, hey, I know what you mean by that. I know what it would be like to observe an event that was 4% likely, and I can kind of get my head around what it would be like to observe an event that was 1 in a million. And I can think of how
Dude,
orders
I
of
had
magnitude.
Draper say this to me. I had Draper say this to me.
Really?
Yeah, he was
That's
really he
interesting.
was really chill with it in like a private combo that we had at a conference recently.
Oh, you mean say like what you said, not the objection?
Oh yeah, like what you just said, which is like I said.
Yeah, I was going to say,
I
Paul
said
and I have
my
talked
I
about
said
this. We
my
agree about
calculus, right?
this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I said my calculus, and Draper was very cooperative. He's like, yeah, I can see how you would think about this that way, and blah blah blah
Mm.
blah, and like he worked with me
And
rather
the
than
cool
just
thing about what you were doing is you're just saying, hey, suppose it's even as low as 1 in a million. It's
yeah.
still a hell. I mean, if it's, it's a lot more likely than it is on atheism, especially with this level of specificity. Or at the very least, that doesn't, it's not crazy. You can hone it and say, well, I think it would be a little more like this. I think it'd be a little more like that. But when you show that the proportions are like this, and that if you have the proportions like this at the inputs, you get this as an output, that's really surprising, even to me. When I was reading through Richard's book, I was like, okay, all right, okay, yeah, okay. And then it comes out like 98 some percent. I'm like, what? Is that right? I'm sure he didn't make an error, but I still like ran the numbers, right? But that's just true generally of humans in math, right? You just can be really surprised how fast, additive probabilities can add up, and how fast dwindling probabilities can dwindle. And there's a lot of surprises. We're not great at probability theory. The Kahneman and Tversky stuff shows that it's not super duper natural to us, right? We got to learn it, and we're gonna have a lot of surprises along the way. And so one of those surprises can be with even ballpark figures of the ratios of expectations give us really high posterior probability. That came as a surprise to me. It's not like I had as some goal to make the resurrection come out that high, given these assignments that I really believe. It was more like, I wonder how low you can go. Ted Poston and I did this in grad school in our master's. He was doing his PhD. I was doing my master's.
You were at Boston and
Yeah,
in
I
grad
did a
school?
master's at Missouri while he was doing his PhD at Missouri, and we co-authored like 6 papers together.
Tim shows up with his
What? Where did this guy come from? Who let him in?
Hey,
My gosh.
What just happened? What just
decided,
happened?
yo,
Yeah,
he's
Oh my
on a roll
God.
there,
let
Trent,
him
man.
come home now.
Oh man,
Somebody left the back door open.
they did. I ended right on in. Good to be in here,
What's up, man? What's
Dude,
up?
I know. I've been listening. Literally, had the longest drive home. I've been listening this entire time. Trent, you've been on a roll of rolls of rolls. I don't know if you drank coffee. I don't know.
No,
It's
I've had
nighttime.
0 coffee today, and I got up at 4:58 in the morning, and got home. Fan can testify to this because he saw me roll home on video, and got home at like 8:10, and just put on a shirt and jumped online.
Oh my gosh.
This is me after a 15 to 16 hour workday.
You see, I see. That's how I'm trying to be. That's how I'm
On
to be.
no coffee, and
Hey,
I've
hey,
eaten
but do you have 3 young
3/4
kids?
of a fillet of salmon all day. No, I ate a small tub of Icelandic skyr
Ooh.
with almonds and blackberries.
See, I'm not enjoying my life properly, I guess. Let's see.
So, okay, what's happening with him here?
Nothing. He just got home, so he's.
Oh,
gonna
you
join
just
us for
literally
the
got
last
home.
30
Okay.
minutes, yeah.
Hey,
Yeah,
how's it going?
Yeah, legitimately, yeah. It's
So, did you say
So-
we had some super chats? I love, I'm obviously my favorite.
let's go through some super chats, and then
Yeah,
we
my
can
favorite
kinda-
thing is interacting with people.
and then we can kind of cover the whole. What does it mean to justify numbers thing? Because like really,
Well, I feel like I just did. That was my whole
yeah,
spiel on that.
basically right. Like, I don't know what like.
We
Man,
You've
justified
been listening
them.
the whole time. I
by-
don't even think we have to go through the video
Nah,
because of the pinned comment.
he
hell no.
took most of the video back. He negated most of the video with the comment.
So all right, super chats. Bark bark. Thank you, Trent. You know the story there, yeah.
I don't even want to talk about it.
yeah, no,
It's
we
not
don't need
furry.
to.
It's not furry stuff.
No, it's all good. Trent, you have it
Okay.
right. Let's move on.
Can you guys do a reaction to the recent 9 philosopher debate on Miles' channel, please? good amount of bays in it. I have no clue what this is talking about. Do
Me
you?
neither, but I'm game.
Miles Donahue?
Bays me, bro. Bays me, bro.
I think he's
Yeah.
talking about Miles or is that a different guy? I think it's Miles Donahue. Right?
Skywalker, shoot me an email, than@inspiringphilosophy.com, with a link to the video that you want us to review. And then it's got bays in it. I'm sure we'll do it. Sounds fun. Bro needing exact numbers kills naturalism by default. Do you know what do you know what he means by this?
I don't.
Bro needing exact numbers kills naturalism.
It.
Is he saying that like if we were to get the exact numbers, naturalism would be like really low?
It's.
sure.
I mean, if I didn't know better, I'd say he was saying that this guy asking for exact numbers somehow goes against his naturalism. I don't know. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, beats me, man.
Trent, you are my fan. Ask me for a shout out.
What's the call name there?
Skywalker BS 7029.
You are my fan. Ask me for a shout. I'm sorry, I can't remember who that is. I used to be called the Luke Skywalker of philosophy by a lot of people, though. When I was young, I had long blonde hair.
Hey, there you go.
All right. The Bayesian epistemology I learned from you saved me from grounding my case on any embarrassing presuppositions that could have been exposed by my dad in a recent argument. So, thanks, I guess.
You're welcome, right? From we the Bayesians.
You know,
No, that's good. But it does, I love it when people are able to use these tools, because that's all they are, is tools,
Yeah.
to both understand and ground their own faith better and defend it better. And it does suck that there are presuppositionalists out there. That's a sad thing. That's part of the problem of evil.
this is a thing that Shang said in his video that I think is really weird, because in the beginning of the video, he says something along the lines of, well, Bayes doesn't help apologists. All it does is expose the assumptions in their arguments. And I
That
remember,
seems like a good thing.
I was gonna say,
So does
Yeah.
deductive logic. So does
and I'm
deductive
like,
logic.
I remember Tim and I were on the phone talking about this today, and we're like,
Like literally today.
That's
and I'm like, that's a good thing. That's
Yeah.
why we use it for
It's one of the great things
transparency.
about analytic philosophy is continental philosophers sort of hide their theses so that nobody can like really get a good chance to refute them. It's like continental philosophy is like Jello, right? You push over here and it pops up over here. Whereas analytic philosophy says we just walk around with targets on our chest, right?
Mhm.
Say, in fact, in our papers, we're like, here are the top 3 ways you should use to try to defeat me.
Yeah.
Well, you know what, Trent? What's crazy is I figured out a long time after, when the new atheism was huge, and I was getting deep into like atheist philosophy. I was like, why do I enjoy myself when I read Paul Draper and those alikes? But I literally want to like blow my brains out listening to these online atheists. And I'm like, one person's argumentation is objectively worse and another person's is better, but my faith seems like it gets strengthened when I read the opposite side. What's going on? And it's literally that right there, dude. It's literally that. It's like, I actually know what they're arguing.
Yeah, really.
I don't know what they're arguing.
If people have not read the debate between me and Paul, it's in a 2015 book called, it's one of those handbooks of, is it either the Handbook of Philosophy of Religion or the Rutledge Handbook of Problem of Evil or something like that?
It's the problem of evil, isn't it?
I think so.
Explanation and the Problem of Evil.
There you go.
Is that what it's called?
That's what it's called.
Yeah, that's really,
life.
it's one of the few times when you had an atheist and a theist who had all the same assumptions arguing against one another. Because typically it's like there are 2 ships crossing in the night. So,
But yeah, Tim and I were on the phone talking about this.
that's a $10. That's
and-
nice. Thank you, Tim Daniel 9644. That's a nice super chat.
That's the other cardinal sin that Tim and I commit when we use Bayes to argue for Christianity is we're transparent.
Yeah, that's right. You suck. Try to be less clear. Jerk.
Right, yeah. Love y'all's channel and all that, but I gotta call this out. Stop saying woke. Oh shoot, I just said it. Sorry, man. Please, because
No,
y'all
you
have
didn't.
no.
You didn't say it. You mentioned it because
Well,
you're quoting him. So
well,
you did not use the term. You mentioned it.
I
You
would say
Hey,
you
there
this
you
is
go.
a very woke super chat.
All
y'all
right.
have
All right.
no definition. Sounds like this is a wokester, huh? Poor little
Oh man.
wokester. Poor little wokester.
You know what's
Can
you know
you
what's funny?
imagine a wokester coming to me for sympathy?
You know what's funny, Fan, is I don't know how long this person's been following us, but like the fact that they thought they could get away with this comment's actually really funny. Like this is not the stream
Hey
you send
man,
something like this
they
into.
can do that all day long for what is that, $9.99?
This is not
Bring
the
it on.
stream.
Yeah. Hey, great. More of it. I want to hear about more. I want to hear more about DEI.
Now, why do you think we got Tim here?
That's all. Oh, don't.
Revealing the plot, Fan.
Oh man. Lamb, thank you, man. Take my shekels and nerd out than can't listen while at work, but wanted to drop by to say Bays is based.
I like it. I like it.
Do you have a brief example or two of bad methodology and biblical criticism, faulty conclusion they draw? Yeah, I mean, I think for starters, just their arguments from silence. That's the most immediate example. I would also argue that in historical Jesus studies, one example, for instance, is like when they try to reconstruct the scholars that do hold to Q, even though the scholarship is moving away from Q right now. The scholars that still do hold to Q, for instance, will use the criterion of similarity as a negative criterion rather than a positive criterion. And it's meant to be a positive criterion, right? So some scholars will go, well, this doesn't meet the criterion of dissimilarity. Therefore, this is a redaction, or therefore it is not original. And that's that's bad methodology, I would argue.
So one that's even more biased is when they'll say that, for example, the passage where Jesus predicts the destruction of Jerusalem had to be written after AD 70 because he would have had to, the author of that passage would have had to have known that Jerusalem was going to be destroyed in order to write that. Well, that just literally assumes that he could not possibly have predicted it ahead of time, right? And that's the most blatant one I've ever seen.
Yeah.
It's like they literally say, this passage mentions the destruction of Jerusalem as a prediction, but that didn't happen until 70. So it must have been written after 70 because after all, you can't predict something in advance like that. That's blatantly. And in one of Marcus Borg's books, he actually has like an appendix where he has assumptions. I wish I had that book to hand, but that's an example. Yeah. And I love the, I think that's a George Costanza. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I got my ring.
There's so many examples, but I'm planning on doing a stream on this topic at some point in the future.
Yeah.
It just depends on when at the end of the
I'd
day.
love to do if I had time,
needs
I
to
would
be
do
done.
one on Ehrman. I would just go through an Ehrman book sentence by sentence.
Yeah, I was gonna have.
It needs to be done, honestly.
Yeah, I've been talking to Tim McGrew and Lady McGrew about it because Tim McGrew had a really cool lecture on this topic actually at ETS. I'll see if I can't snag the video footage of it.
Cool.
Send it to you. All right. What is the prior for God specifically wants to raise the Jewish Messiah from the dead? I don't really know the prior for that one, but that's not the prior that for the theory that I'm working with anyway.
Yeah, I've never seen anybody ever try to assign a prior to that. So, but I do address this in a lot of different things that I've said, a lot of different appearances. I've addressed this issue, and it's a type token thing, right? So we know that in a storm that hits an apple orchard, there's going to be a lot of trees, a lot of apples that fall to the ground, right? And if we were Laplace's demon, if we knew how the wind was working, what the velocity was, and if we knew the stem consistency, we could predict which apples would fall, and we could predict how fast they would fall, and if we knew their mass, we could predict with what impact they would hit the ground, right? All that stuff's just written into the laws of physics. Laplace's demon can know that. We can't. But the only reason we can't is because what Bertrand Russell called medical limitations. We just don't have big enough brains, right? But because of the sheer logistics of it, we have no idea which apples are going to fall at which time and with what impact. But we know this: it's going to blow some apples off some trees, right? And the prediction is God will perform. You can start with levels of generality, right? And every level of generality is going to be more probable. So the generic proposition, God will perform some super miracle, that's got more probability than it will be in the form of an incarnation, which has more probability than it will occur at some specific time, And maybe you can argue that there's something special about that time in the Greco-Roman history that I think raises the probability over other times for sure. But it's not like it makes that time likely. And I think you could probably say there's some certain things about Judaism that make it quite likely, or much more likely, that the incarnate individual would be from the Jews than any other race, the probability raiser. But I don't know that within that there's any information pertaining to a particular individual. Jesus, the particular individual, only comes into it after we get all this evidence of his actual resurrection. So it's not that he's saying something wrong. He's just saying the wrong thing.
Yeah.
Well, there's no relevance. That probably there's no relevance
right?
in apologetics.
Because the theory is not God wants to raise like the Jewish Messiah, and that's the ultimate reduction of the.
Well, I'm just saying that because I think implied here is the following assertion: we cannot sensibly assign any positive probability to the proposition that sentence in quotes, right? I think that's really the veiled assertion. And I agree with that. That's not wrong. It's just irrelevant.
Yeah. But like, even with the general to specific thing that you're doing, like, one of the things I argue in my theodicy book is that the theodicy, I think, would predict that God is going to choose this particular people group to bring heaven on earth on.
Yeah, I think it's plausible.
Right? And all this other stuff. So it's like, we have a coherent narrative story that makes sense of all of this.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine a better milieu for the incarnation than Judaism under Greco-Roman rule and early Roman Empire. I mean, I'm not saying that it's like slam dunk, but it's like there's a lot, the crossroads of culture, foundation of Western philosophy, combining with the sort of wisdom literature of the Jews and a highly, the principal monotheists of the ancient world. I think there's a lot going for it, and which is to say that on a Bayesian framework, it's a probability raiser, right? It makes it more likely than the alternatives. And so when it turns out to be that just by the structure of Bayes' theorem confirms that hypothesis.
Before we move on from this one, from Modern Atheism, he's still watching. Actually, Nick Muter's book actually goes to address this. I just did a quick query in here, and Nick Muter's book on the resurrection, he actually says, this is what I was able to find just doing a quick Control F. He says in a random spot, however, if Jesus is the Messiah and his resurrection is consistent with the Messiah's mission, then this increases the prior. And he goes on to say what he argues in part 3, et cetera, and so forth. So he actually motivates this somewhere in his book, and he actually has, let's see if I can actually share my screen here real fast. Because he actually has nodes that he uses here to. So tell me if you can see this.
Yep, I got it up.
All right, cool. So he does this. So he goes, he's got like nature of reality, connecting to Messiah, pointing to the resurrection. They're both pointing. And then he says that.
Does the arrow represent probability raising?
Honestly, I
think expectation.
Not sure.
Right, but is it a model? Is it an epistemic?
The model, yeah. So nature of reality,
or is it a supportive?
This is he does use nets, and so this is supposed to be that.
Okay, Bayes net.
Yeah. So, but yeah, this is how he models it out, and he spends a lot of time. Like we just Control F in the book, like he goes into a lot on the Messiah.
What book is this? Who's this person?
This is Nick Meter. His book is literally
He's a psychologist.
called. Yeah, his book is
who's also a Bayesian.
It's literally called Resurrection. or the full title is called Resurrection: Extraordinary Evidence for an Extraordinary Claim. He
Nick
actually reached out to
Mueller?
me personally one time, and he said that he made that book by trying to combine contemporary Bayesian probability theory and psychology together to argue for the resurrection.
Tim, can you text me the link to that
Yeah.
book on Amazon, please?
I got you, man.
I've never heard of
I
it.
can get you in contact with Nick.
I would love that because I mean, the psychological explanation is like key to the whole thing.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
One more thing on this comment too, because he could be pointing to this contrastive thing that some people like to do, right? Which is like, okay, well, what is the probability that God wants to do this with like a Jewish Messiah instead of like
rather than
a Canaanite Messiah or like a Roman Messiah or like an American Messiah?
Ooh, that'd
That
be a good
contrastive
band.
thing.
Wouldn't that be a good band name? American Messiah?
Yeah, it would actually go hard.
I'm laughing because as soon as you said American Messiah, the mental image of the album cover was Trump.
That's actually insane, man. I love that though.
Don't let him get a hold of that. We'll get an AI meme and then it'll start a whole controversy.
Oh, I know. That's not me. That's not people already know me well enough to know what that's a joke, not a Trump is the Messiah BS.
Now you're just another Christian nationalist.
No, do you think Trump's the Messiah? Shut
up. But yeah, is there anything you want to say on that contrastive thing, that contrastive objection, if that's what he's trying to get at, Trent?
Only that, like, when you try to do that, you have typically they don't use natural categories. You have to use natural categories, not like just artificial divisions. And there are more natural ways to carve possibility space than the finest possible partition.
Can you better justify the prior of 1 in a million? If I said it's 1 in 10 millions, on which grounds would you say I'm one order of magnitude over for the prior to the resurrection? We kind of already did this basically.
A little bit, but like the general method is to try to think about things that are in those ranges, right? And so it's pretty easy to ask ChatGPT, say, hey, give me 3 or 4 examples of things that would have this, probability or this rate of occurrence. And I do think that at some level it just drops off. People have absolutely no concept of a billion. I don't know if you've ever noticed. We don't know what we don't know what a billion is. Do you know how long a billion? Sorry, you know how long a million seconds is? It's about like two weeks. Pretty sure a million seconds is like 2 weeks. A billion seconds is like 31 years. I mean, there's just we don't understand what a billion is. It's crazy that we have, hundreds of billions of dollars. We're going to have a trillionaire pretty soon. Hell, we may have a trillionaire tomorrow. SpaceX goes semi-public tomorrow.
Oh, yeah, they go public. Yeah.
That's going to be insane. Anyway, we don't know what a billion is.
What was the prompt? Trent,
so
you said give me 4 examples of 1 in a million order of magnitude / rate of occurrence.
Yeah. I mean, ChatGPT I'm sure it can tell you.
Yeah. I'm trying to pull one up right now.
Go ahead to while you're doing that, Tim. The most recent example of this, Trent, is there's a black hole, ton 618. If you know about it.
Nope.
It is a supermassive black hole. It has the mass of over 60 billion suns.
I don't know what a billion is. That's a problem.
Right. and its shadow is roughly 1,300 astronomical units, and it would take light several weeks to travel across its
event horizon.
Yeah.
Or diameter, as it were.
Its event horizon. Several weeks. So, like, try to conceptualize that.
Yeah. It's insane. We can't. We honestly can't. Light speed stuff, like even the concept of a light year, we can meter it out, but like we don't grasp what it is for light to take a year to travel. So I do agree that it's at some level it becomes beyond our ability to comprehend. But I feel like I get what an order of magnitude over a million is. I feel like I definitely get 1 in a million pretty well. And I think I can imagine that order, but it doesn't matter if I can't, because at some level it just becomes abysmally low, right? You just have a qualitative category called unimaginably low.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
And
Yeah,
and
the
also, like,
example
and also
that
here's sorry, Tim. One more thing I want to say. And also, here's the thing. Let's just run the numbers at an order of magnitude over.
Yeah, you can
See
do it
what
either way.
happens.
Right. Just
Right?
exactly.
Like,
just model it.
what I
See if
don't
it makes a
this is the
difference.
thing I don't understand about the YouTube skeptics right now.
Yeah.
Run the numbers, do the work. Don't just be like, well, how do you know this? And why aren't you like, well, let's just see what happens.
Yeah. For a lot of us, it's like, holy cow, you can go do some pretty, you can do numbers way far off what I actually believe. And the resurrection still stays super high. It's crazy. Like it really is surprising. Like if I put in, values that like support my view, and if I cut them by 1/10 and take the skeptical views and multiply them by 10, it barely affects the outcome. And so that's the Bayes theorem as tool for adjusting your credences. It's like, well, so what if it was lower than what if it's one order of magnitude more improbable than I think I can clearly imagine? Okay, well, that would be 10 million. So, okay, well, if it were that, then it drops from 98% probable resurrection to 96.5%, and you're like, holy crap, I had no idea. So a lot of it's really about ratios. I mean, I'm a Bayes factor guy anyway. So it's really more about ratios than it is raw numbers.
Yeah. Just the example that it gave, one interesting example is it said that 1 second out of 11.6 days, there are about 1 million seconds in roughly 11.57 days. So picking out 1 second from that whole span is 1 in a million.
Which would be like really, really, really unlikely. Yet I feel like there's coincidences that are basically that do happen. You know what I'm saying? It's like, I think I've had that happen a couple times in my life.
Yeah.
Versus 1 in 10 million. There's no way I've observed something to occur at that frequency, But I'm affirming with that at some point our imagination just ceases to be useful. But I'm denying that means that we can't reason it within limits.
Have you considered that since you are theist, you are automatically exempt from Bayesian inference forms because you are biased and wrong?
Thank you for
the answer is no. I have never considered that. Next question. What a dumb thing to say.
Well, he's just like making fun of the internet.
Oh, okay.
That's all.
Oh, I get it. That's basically what they're saying. Yeah.
Yep. Thank you. Look at that.
Thank you, Randy. More Giga Chad.
Whoa.
5 inspiring philosophy memberships. Oh, it's the guy that we made fun of for doing the woke thing. He said, I've been around for a while, 3 years back when Than was exploring reality and y'all did those gaming
streams. He even called it
streams.
exploring, dude. He knows. I know.
You, bro. But that was funny. He thought it was funny with us taking the jab back at him with the woke thing. Thanks for being a good sport, bro. We will. Hey, I'm considering trying to do some gaming streams and stuff like that here. We'll see what happens. Would you ever do videos going through Richard Carrier's books and arguments? Probably not, to be honest.
Okay, so Trent, I want to say this real fast. This is the number one concern we get from anyone who discovers through Than and I that Bayes is, and like Bayesian epistemology and all that exists and it's actually used in the philosophy of religion. They always go, but wait a minute, Richard Carrier, same thing every time. Richard Carrier also uses the tool to argue that Jesus didn't exist, and then they get really worried that the tool's just it's use it's inscrutable what you can do with the tool. They infect the tool with the viewpoint of the person they're afraid to entertain.
It's almost like wokesters' reactions to Trump. Like if Trump said, like almonds are good for you, they'd be like, oh my God, almonds cause cancer.
Didn't they do that with the Tylenol though? So the
Oh my
woman that
God.
purposely ate the Tylenol because he said, "Hey, it's gonna do that." And they said, I just saw all these
Oh
TikToks and I'm
no.
like, "I'm eating all this Tylenol now. I'm
Oh
pregnant."
no. So I mean,
Yeah.
at one level, I'm inclined to say I don't want to treat his work with I don't want to dignify it by taking it seriously. But you know, quite some time ago, one of my great students, Logan Gage. Do you know
Yeah.
him? Y'all know him?
You co-authored that one paper against Richard Dawkins in the New Theist book.
Right. Yeah, and Dawkins is a clown show, right?
Yeah.
Absolute clown town. But we were like, okay, let's be calm because he's always a very calming influence on me. God knows I need one. And so the shtick was let's just ignore the stupidity and let's just evaluate the claim, right? And a lot of people have really appreciated that article that I barely wanted to write.
That was an amazing article. That was the gateway drug for me, man.
Was it really?
Yeah. Oh
Huh.
yeah, dude. Oh yeah. When
Well, I
I was
enjoyed writing it, that's for sure.
I thought that all parsimony arguments from the philosophy of atheism what killed theism, and then like
Mm.
I read that and I was like, oh.
Yeah, so it's a good example of how sometimes if you take, intrinsically bad stuff, but give it a good analytic rebuttal, it can do some good. So I will hereby pledge my willingness to go through his book and show specifically how he misuses Bayes' theorem. How about that? I'm down.
Hey, we could do a series.
I'm into it.
We could do a series, man.
I'm into it.
All right.
I love forcing Than to read text that he just I know
Wait,
he's gonna
wait,
hate.
wait, no, hold
Gonna
on.
make him mad.
I've read everything from Richard Carrier. I have.
That's why
This
there's
is part of why I'm apprehensive about this because I don't want to do it again.
hey, it's funny to me, man. It's funny what you put yourself through.
Yeah, nobody thinks it's funny when I'm mad.
Trent, do you know about the Schellenberg review that Than did? The woke review of Schellenberg's book? He did a woke review of Schellenberg's newest book, and it was painful. Yeah.
John has really gone downhill. It's really a shame.
Trent, imagine, man.
Say it.
That Austin guy is in here. I'm sorry that I'm using this word for you, man, but imagine you have a boomer that went woke during COVID.
Oh yes, yeah.
And
it's really kind of sad and pathetic,
right? And then this boomer that went woke during COVID, got a philosophy degree and then wrote a book about Christianity being bad and therefore not true.
That's another good one.
That's the gist of Schellenberg's book.
Like didn't he say that Jesus wasn't nice for cursing that tree? Wasn't that one of the arguments?
Yeah.
That's not nice.
Yep.
I mean, it could be evidence against. It's just like, okay, it's like, here's a penny. I'll give you a penny for that. I can say that's a little weird. I'll give you a penny for that.
7 cents or something, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Last super chat here. I hope this question is received well. Does Trent still hold that the Trinity and the Muslim God are the same, worshipped by both Christians and Muslims?
Oh my God.
Oh boy.
Have you stopped beating your wife, Than?
What? No. Why would I stop beating my wife?
It's like the same question. Hey, when did you realize you were gay? The framing is the same.
Oh my God, I love that clip. Why are you gay?
Why are you gay?
I am not gay.
So Trent, so you hold that the Trinity and Allah are the same being.
Sure, yeah. So what? I mean, it's just one of those things where it's like people take their emotional investment in the sound of a sentence and then read theology off of that. Because remember, I mean, and it's also an inability the negative reactions to that are an inability to, it's really people's inability to follow the reasoning there is really revelatory of an absence of the philosophical spirit and the philosophical mindset. And I mean, I really mean that. This is a great example and sort of litmus test of whether a person does or does not have the philosophical mindset. Because I gave the example of the Stoic parable of or the paradox of the hooded man, right? The hooded man paradox. So you love your brother and think he's the most trustworthy man in the world, but you don't trust people that wear hoodies. What's hilarious is hoodies, but even back in the Stoic days, literally the hooded man. So but you don't trust people in hoodies, right? So your brother, for some reason, dons a hoodie, and you see him out in public, but you don't see his face, and you're like, I don't trust that guy. That guy's up to no good. And so now consider the sentence, that guy doesn't trust his brother. But he does trust his brother, but he doesn't trust that guy, but that guy's his brother, so he doesn't trust his brother. Right? So what this gives rise to the de dicto de re distinction in modes of reference. And clearly, the writer of the Quran, whoever it was
the angel Jibril.
Yeah, sure it was. It was, it's a bastardization of some stuff they heard from Christian and Jewish philosophers. And just the way reference works, they picked up the referent of the one true God, and they just said a bunch of false stuff about it. Just like people who think that Clark Kent is a weak nerd and a coward are but think Superman is like strong and courageous. They have these modes of apprehension that lead to contradictory statements about the same thing.
Well, Trent, you're the one that told me about another analogy of the long lost brother who moves into the same neighborhood and meets his actual brother, but his actual brother thinks that he's just his friend. And doesn't think he's his brother.
Yeah. You can, right? There's all sorts
but
of
he's
ways.
Still successfully referring.
That's right. We successfully refer. But that has literally, and we said this on the show, literally no intrinsic theological or soteriological significance. Like we said it explicitly. It does not mean, I happen to think that there is some merit to Muslims worshiping, right? Like sort of like in The Last Battle, there was the good Calormene, who's obviously a trope for Muslims. So I despise Islam, but I'm friendly towards various Muslims. And I think some Muslims sort of worship God in a way that is somewhat meritorious. I don't think it's entirely non-meritorious. And I'm sure there are Christians who reject some of God's miracles and might even attribute some of God's miracles to Satan, right?
Yeah.
Really skeptical Christians are going to attribute a miracle that God does to Satan. That doesn't mean that they are Satanists. Doesn't mean that they're blasphemers. It means that their mode of apprehension is deeply limited or flawed. It's really no big deal. And it is one of the fastest ways to determine that somebody lacks the philosophical mindset, that they think that they will jump from that just purely semantic thesis over to anything soteriological. You might think it has soteriological consequences, or you might think it has zero soteriological consequences. There's no connection whatsoever between the co-referential thesis and any religious proposition at all. You have to add auxiliary hypotheses to get any religious content out of that at all.
Well, that's always been my question about those who almost seem to think that it's intuitive to adopt a descriptivist understanding of reference, because they'll say things like, oh, well, if you describe Jesus differently than I describe Jesus, that's all you need to say that one of us is successfully referring and another person is unsuccessfully referring. But I've always wondered this, Trent. Tell me if this is right. Feel free to shoot this down. I'll never think about it again. But I'm like, okay, but like how much of a description? So like how wide does a description?
I don't think there is any. I think there's no limits. No limits.
So I'm like, so
because
do we ever successfully refer to anything?
Reference is causal. Yeah. Reference is causal.
So,
So
I just wonder about, yeah.
I could get everything wrong about you, but if I come to learn your name in the right way, I'm still referring to you. I
Yep.
suppose I mean, you're looking a little Islamic yourself these days, you know? So I can, so I could say, hey,
It's true,
I know
actually.
your name. I'm introduced to you. And I'm told by one person you're a religious fanatic. I come to the false conclusion that you're a Muslim because of your facial hair. And then and somebody says, hey, have you met Tim? And I'm like, yeah, that radical Muslim. I said, yeah, he was wearing that blue hat. I've still successfully ascribed the property of wearing a blue hat to you, even though I've gotten your religion wrong.
You know, I never told you, Trent, but like literally when I grew this beard out for the first time, I went into a coffee shop with my dad. There were two women dressed up in like the Islamic getup,
Yeah.
and one of them literally came to my car and asked for my Instagram, and I was like, "Oh my gosh!"
Well, I was about to say,
Now,
man, you ain't getting on that plane. You ain't getting
Okay.
past TS. You're going to be in
Hey,
the
you guys
little
are just
room at
yapping
TSA,
about
bro.
pointless stuff now.
Sorry. Anyway,
I'm trying to go to bed.
the point is, but yeah, I mean, this is very off topic, but I think it's probably not uncommon for well-meaning Christians to attribute divine miracles to Satan, because there's a lot of misbegotten skepticism about miracles among Christians, right? And I think there are some alleged Christian miracles that are satanic. I think Benny Hinn and Kenneth Copeland and all that stuff I think that's satanic activity, right? So there are cases to take Benny Hinn and Kenneth Copeland, whose alleged miracles are, I think, acts of Satan. Now go by cases very similar, very similar, very similar. And it's very plausible that at some point, there's a person who is, to me, indistinguishable from them and Kenneth Copeland, and I attribute an actual divine miracle that occurs, through them in some way to Satan, and I've literally called God's miracle satanic. Now that doesn't make me a Satanist, and it doesn't mean God's mad at me. It doesn't make God hate me. It doesn't make me a bad Christian. It just makes me wrong.
Mhm.
well said.
Schellenberg, think of the trees.
All right, Than, how do you want to end this, man? You sound like you're suffering.
We got one more.
We are over 2 hours, and I do need to attend to people in my home.
Yes. Even if I was a Protestant, which I might actually be, I'm with Trent on this one. Semantic theories of reference outperform ortho-row presuppositionalism.
Yeah, I like this guy. I'll match his $5.
All right.
Awesome.
Well, is there anything man, I almost feel bad because we didn't really go over his video at all. But like, again,
Why would he took the video back? He retracted the video.
yeah, the whole entire video was basically
really
retracted. It just boils down to the numbers, Mason. If you haven't played Call of Duty, Trent. But
No, I have not.
I don't even know what that's. I've played it, so.
But yeah, the bottom line is most of what he said, I can completely agree with.
hold on.
Oh my God.
You can do it. You can talk.
What it comes down to in his pen statement is a bunch of random truisms that I completely agree with, combined with the use of a bunch of weasel word jargon like independent evidence that just doesn't really mean anything. And then he just misses the whole nature of personal explanation. And that's the answer. The answer is, how do we assign the numbers? Through a narrative approach to probability and through psychological and personal explanation, through understanding the intrinsic character of persons, that persons being the things we know best, and that falls under the propensity theory of probability.
So this is from a video game, Trent.
Okay.
And the context here is like, this is like Cold War era, and in the game you're a character who is like basically getting brainwashed to be like a super soldier and stuff like that, and you see numbers and stuff like that.
Okay.
So
Head.
No, I want to keep pressing you.
Hey! Who are you people? What do you want from me?
We want the numbers, Mason. That's all we've ever wanted.
Keep hearing the fucking numbers!
It's
oh
a
well, I forgot the swearing in this.
That is perfect.
No, that's good. No, that's good.
That's
Okay.
the way to end a video right there.
Yeah, that's good. I thought it was gonna be honestly, Than. But that was good.
And let the record show that in this forum I was not the first person to drop an F-bomb?
It was the guy asking for the
Hey,
numbers.
good job, Trent. I'm proud of you, man.
I haven't flipped anybody off all episode. It's so
Nope.
tempting to just flip you guys off right at the end of the video.
Oh, we'll flip each other off when I end the stream.
It's so tempting.
So, well, Trent, he said this was a part 1 of his response to me. So,
Oh. Wait, there's more.
We're gonna do this again then.
I don't know. Well, I don't know where you go from. What are the numbers?
Have him on. Have him on to chat with me.
Yeah, Shang,
We
if
need
you
to
want to
do
come.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm skeptical he'll want to do that because he's made responses to Mike and I in the past.
Yeah.
and
He may
we've
want to
invited him
watch
to
some
come
of
talk
my
with
past videos.
us.
He might be scared of you, honestly, man. He might be like, yeah, he might want to come box me or something.
He probably ought to be. I think if he's rational, he probably will be.
The posterior probability. Anyway, all right. I'm gonna end the stream. I am very tired. It's time for me to go to bed. Thanks, Trent, for coming on, and thank you all for listening. Until next time, God bless.
Bye.